Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take your curiosity, your topic, and really try to turn it into understanding. We do the sifting so you get the key insights efficiently.
Exactly. And today we're looking into something really quite strange. The Chase Vault in Barbados and its legendary moving coffins.
A listener pointed us towards the Wikipedia page on this one, and it's definitely a captivating enigma.
It really is. So our mission, if you like, for this deep dive is to explore the facts and, maybe more importantly, the legends surrounding this. We want to try and separate what's, verifiable from speculation.
And also maybe understand why this story has stuck around for so long.
Precisely. Why does it endure?
Okay, so let's set the scene. The Chase Vault, where is it?
It's located within the Cemetery of Christ Church Parish Church. That's in Oistins, Barbados. A marble vault above ground, I believe.
Right. And the core legend, the thing that makes it famous, is this claim that between roughly 1808 and 1819, every time this vault was sealed and then later reopened for another burial.
The coffins inside, heavy lead coffins, mind you, had moved. Sometimes quite violently, apparently, not just shifted a bit.
Okay, let's run through the timeline. The burials mentioned in the story. There was a Mrs. Goddard in 1807, sort of before the main events, but sometimes mentioned.
Yeah, the focus really shifts to the Chase family. First, little Anne Maria Chase, just 2 years old, buried in 1808.
Then her older sister, Dorcas Chase, 12 years old, in 1812.
And then later that same year, their father, Thomas Chase.
The accounts also mention another infant, a date often unspecified, and then two more burials later on, 1816 and 1819. The names aren't always consistent in the tellings.
And the description of the scene each time they opened it? Well, it's quite dramatic. The coffins were found, quote, in a confused state, having been apparently tossed from their places.
Some accounts even say some were standing on end or upside down. Heavy lead coffins.
Yes, it's always emphasized how heavy they were. Takes real force.
And getting into the vault wasn't simple, was it?
No, not at all. The sources, like the Wikipedia page, describe this massive stone or marble slab door. It supposedly took 6 or 7 men just to move it.
And after closing it, masons would cement it shut, sealed tight.
Right. And adding to the mystery is the detail about the floor often being described as sandy. Yet, crucially, there were reportedly never any footprints found inside.
Or signs of flooding, which might, float or move things around.
Exactly. No water, no footprints, just chaos among the coffins. It paints a very eerie picture.
So where does this story first appear in, like, a documented form?
Well, the first widely cited published account is from 1833. It's in a book called Transatlantic Sketches by General James Edward Alexander.
Okay. And he basically recounts the events as we've just described them.
Pretty much, yeah. He lays out the basic narrative, the sealed vault, the disturbed coffins, the lack of explanation. This account seems to be foundational.
But like a lot of these old strange tales, tracing it back further gets complicated.
Very. The author Jerome Clark, who researches these kinds of mysteries, suggests the story really originates in anecdotes told by, or is attributed to, Thomas H. Orderson.
He was the rector of Christ Church back in the early 1800s, right? At the time these events supposedly happened.
Correct. But here's the catch. Clark notes that even these earliest accounts attributed to Orderson were apparently conflicting. They didn't always agree on the details.
Okay, so the very source seems a bit shaky, variations right from the start.
Exactly. It immediately makes you wonder how much the story might have changed or, been embellished, even in those initial tellings. Clark argues that many later versions seem to stem from these differing Orderson accounts.
And then it got picked up elsewhere.
Yes. Also in 1833, it appeared in a popular collection called The Mirror of Literature, Amusement, and Instruction, edited by Reuben Percy. That would have definitely spread the story further.
Naturally, a bizarre tale like this attracts investigators, or at least curious minds.
Oh, absolutely. The Scottish folklorist Andrew Lang looked into it. He wrote about it in a 1907 article for the Folklore Journal.
And what did Lang find? Did he uncover anything concrete?
Well, that's the thing. He did some proper digging. He went through the actual Christchurch burial register for the period. He checked contemporary Barbadian newspapers. Nothing. Zilch. No official record, no news report, nothing mentioning coffins being mysteriously rearranged in the Chase Vault during those years.
Wow. Okay, that's a significant absence of evidence, isn't it?
It really is. The closest thing to a contemporary account Lang could find reference to was this supposed unpublished first-hand account by someone named Nathan Lucas.
Right, you mentioned him. Lucas claimed he was there in April 1820.
That's the claim. Apparently, he said he was present when the governor at the time, Lord Combermere, had the vault open one last time, found the coffins disturbed again, and ordered them all removed and buried separately. The vault was then supposedly left empty and sealed.
But this account from Lucas, it's not something we can actually read directly.
That's the problem. It's only attributed to Lucas by another source, who themselves remain unidentified. So it's essentially hearsay. We don't have a confirmed direct eyewitness statement for any of it, especially not the earlier incidents.
So no contemporary records, and the only potential eyewitness account is secondhand at best.
And this lack of solid, verifiable testimony is, of course, a major point for skeptical investigators looking at the case today.
Yep.
People like Joe Nickell and Benjamin Radford.
They emphasize the inconsistencies in the story across different tellings too, right?
Yes, the details shift depending on who's telling it and when. That's often a red flag for folklore versus factual reporting.
Still, you can see why it caught on. The Victorian era, with its interest in spiritualism and the unexplained, they must have loved this.
Oh, definitely. Even Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, chimed in. He apparently speculated about animal magnetism or some kind of psychic force being involved.
Okay. Shows how much it captured the imagination. But let's get back to the modern skeptical view. Nickell and Radford. What are their main arguments against the story being literally true?
Well, beyond the points we've covered, the variations in the story, the lack of direct eyewitnesses, they really stress the complete silence from contemporary Barbadian sources.
It just seems unlikely that something that weird would happen repeatedly in a prominent churchyard without anyone locally writing it down or reporting on it at the time.
Precisely. If coffins are genuinely being thrown around inside a sealed vault by unknown means, you'd expect some local documentation, some official inquiry, something. Its absence is telling.
And didn't Radford actually visit the vault recently?
He did, yes. In 2019, Benjamin Radford went to Barbados and examined the vault's interior.
And what did he find? Or perhaps what didn't he find?
He reported that the brickwork inside looked intact. He saw no obvious signs of damage, like chips or cracks, that you might expect if heavy lead coffins had been violently colliding with the walls repeatedly over the years.
Right, that physical evidence, or lack thereof, adds another layer of doubt to the dramatic descriptions.
It does. It all points away from the literal interpretation of the legend.
Okay, so if the stories told probably didn't happen, why does it exist? Why this specific tale? Is it unique?
Well, that's another interesting angle. It turns out it's not entirely unique. There's a whole category of folklore, often referred to as moving coffin legends or restless coffins.
So the Chase Fault is just one example of a wider phenomenon?
It seems so. Both Nickell and Radford mention other similar stories from different places, including elsewhere in Barbados, and even some that might predate the Chase Fault events.
So maybe it's tapping into some kind of universal theme or fear about death and burial?
Quite possibly. It suggests a recurring fascination with the idea of the dead not resting peacefully, or of forces we don't understand interfering with the sanctity of the grave.
Now, Joe Nickell proposed a more specific influence, didn't he? Something involving Freemasonry.
Yes, this is a fascinating theory Nickell put forward. He connected the Chase Fault story to Masonic allegory.
How so?
Well, within Freemasonry, there's symbolism related to a secret vault, which often represents death, the grave, and the search for divine truth or resurrection. Nickell noted that at least two of the key figures involved in the Chase Vault story, Thomas Chase himself and the governor, Lord Combermere, were known Freemasons.
Okay, that's an interesting connection.
And it gets more intriguing. Nickell points out another, later, restless coffin story from Barbados, dating to 1943, which explicitly involved Freemasons, and a vault said to contain the remains of the founder of Barbadian Freemasonry.
So, a recurring theme in Barbadian folklore, potentially linked to Masonic circles.
Nickell thinks so. He even suggests that some of the language and specific details used in various retellings of the Chase Vault story echo Masonic rituals, symbols, and phrases.
So his idea isn't necessarily that it was a deliberate Masonic hoax, but that the story might have originated or been shaped by individuals familiar with Masonic symbolism and allegory. The themes resonated, perhaps.
Exactly. The narrative might have been interpreted or retold through that lens. It offers a way to understand the story's structure and persistence without resorting to supernatural explanations. It becomes less about ghosts, more about symbolism taking on a life of its own.
What about Radford's take on the Masonic angle?
Radford acknowledges the possibility, but perhaps frames it slightly differently. He tends to view the Chase Vault primarily as a prime example of the broader moving coffin legend type.
So a local version of a more widespread folktale.
Pretty much. He suggests that any Masonic elements might have been woven into the story later through retelling and adaptation, perhaps because some of the people involved were Masons, rather than the allegory being the original seed of the story.
So maybe a spooky local story gets told, and then elements that fit with Masonic ideas get emphasized or added over time by those familiar with them?
That's one way to look at it, yeah. The story evolves, absorbing different cultural elements as it spreads.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive on the Chase Vault, we have this incredibly persistent, compelling legend. Moving coffins, sealed vault, deep mystery.
But when you dig into it, the concrete evidence just isn't there. No contemporary accounts, conflicting early versions, potential eyewitness testimony is secondhand.
And physical examination doesn't really support the more dramatic claims. It seems likely rooted in local anecdotes that, grew over time.
And it fits into this wider pattern of moving coffin folklore. Plus, there's that intriguing potential connection to Masonic allegory, whether as an origin or an overlay.
It leaves us with a final thought, really, for you listening. Why do these stories, like the Chase Vault, grip us so much even without solid proof?
What is it about them? Are they just spooky tales for entertainment? Do they touch on deeper anxieties about death, or maybe our desire for mystery in a world we try so hard to explain?
Or perhaps they serve as cultural reflections, cautionary tales, or just sparks for the imagination about the unknown, something to definitely ponder.